I haven't revisited any writing in a while. I've revisited plenty of rosters, and I've covered a lot of tier lists, and some random videos here and there on a variety of other subjects. But I kind of wanted to go back to my roots, because this is a Godzilla-based channel. Anyone with a username of Godzilla Brawler probably needs to do a Godzilla-specific focused video every once in a while. Now, a long time ago, like 6+ months ago, I covered many of my Godzilla versus stories that I wrote in my youth a long time ago. And in that video, I covered Godzilla vs. Alien R, which was a original creation that I came up with. Godzilla vs. Sonic, which is to be distinguished from Godzilla vs. Mobius, as well as Deathlock the Kaiju Virus, which was a sort of fan fiction sequel written by a younger version of me that was supposed to be a follow-up to Godzilla 3D to the Max, which, if you do not know, was the movie project that eventually led to Godzilla 2014. There was a lot of complicated legal stuff involved in that transition, but that's the short version. It led to that. Anyone who has watched that video, which is definitely you, right? Humble viewer? Because you clicked on the card and went back and checked out that old video, right? Right. I mentioned in that video that there were two stories that were pertaining to my family. And what I mean by that is, I had two stories. It was Godzilla versus an original kaiju, and each one was a member of my extended family. And I wrote those stories because when I was younger, I'd like to show them the stories I wrote about Godzilla versus them. Obviously, I'm going to blur out the text of those stories because, like I said in that original video, I do not wish to fully reveal the contents of those stories due to their familial nature. But it also gave me an excuse to boot up the Bing AI Image Generator, as well as the Perchance.com AI Image Generator, and I made images of unique entities that are approximate to the pictures and people that I wrote the stories about, but made to be somewhat unique so as to obscure what those people look like, because the actual Microsoft Works word processor documents that these are contained in have pictures of those people in them, but I just wanted to go over them. Hopefully this video doesn't end up a million years long like most of my uploads have been for the last several weeks. Okay, so this original kaiju seen down there at the bottom, I just came up with some random names based off of Japanese translations of English words. So this character will be henceforth referred to as Munemoto. So this is Godzilla versus Munemoto. Now, the image of Godzilla that you can see kind of blurred out here, that was the image I was showing on that previous screen. Slight spoiler, but this one, Godzilla versus Munemoto, it's basically Godzilla versus the 50-foot woman. So it's worth noting that this writing is set on a cruise ship, I think. Fun fact, the only cruise ship I've ever been on technically was before I was even out of the womb. Mom was pregnant with me when I went on that cruise. So technically I have never been on a cruise before, nor have I been on an airplane. This video is being recorded on September 5th, 2024, so it's always possible that that is no longer the case when this video comes out. But anyway, this piece of writing just really shows how dedicated I was to a proper introduction of Godzilla into the story. So my extended family members were on a cruise. Godzilla, someone says. Literally, that's it. Just someone yells Godzilla. It literally says Godzilla, someone says. And then the family member that became the template for Munemoto, literally, and I'm quoting here, trips and falls into the water. Oops. So I'm presuming they're on like the deck of the cruise liner. So they just trip and fall into the water. But it gets better. The water was tested with radiation. And then the extended family member grows until they are the size of Godzilla. Godzilla is not provoked. There is no explanation as to why they start fighting. They just do. Godzilla literally charges his atomic breath and shoots it at Munemoto, who falls into the ocean. And then there's a parenthetical that says, To them, it looked like a tub. I guess that's meant to emphasize the size differential. This has absolutely nothing to do with the story, but I really like this collectible figurine of GMK Godzilla, which is currently blurred out for you, the viewer, but it's a pretty good looking collectible figure if I do say so myself. As I said in that old video, a lot of these stories were just an excuse for the young me to go onto collectible toy websites and copy the images. So Munemoto reverts to normal human size for some reason. So Godzilla literally just blasts Munemoto with a single charge of atomic breath, and it's strong enough to revert her down to normal human size. There is some brief dialogue where basically all that is communicated is, "How did you transform into a giant monster?" To which Munemoto responds, "I don't know." And that's it. It literally doesn't go any further than that. It says here, Godzilla was back. That was a full sentence. It's literally just Godzilla was back.
Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back?
3 words. To my understanding, Godzilla never left. Like, Godzilla literally blasted Munemoto once, and then she shrunk back to human size, but I don't even think the battle, like, conclusively ended at that point. So Munemoto cannonballs back into the water, and then Munemoto, quote, picks up Godzilla and throws him into the ocean. Again, completely unprovoked. I have a feeling Godzilla has a right to self-defense in this situation. So Godzilla charges his atomic breath again, and he hits Munemoto with it. She crouches down and tries to block it, but gets knocked into a building for her troubles, which is confusing because I thought they were on a cruise liner at sea. So maybe they're like docked at a pier alongside a shoreline? I would imagine this is in like the Caribbean or something. So here's an interesting development in the story. Munemoto has the beam weapon attack that Jet Jaguar got in Godzilla Save the Earth, and it has in a parenthetical after it is stated that that happens. Like Jet Jaguar, you probably don't know who he is. So, in a sense, I'm directly addressing the family member that this was written for. Godzilla destroys a building or two in recoil. Like, I guess he gets knocked down or something by the blast of lightning. Meanwhile, the army was planning to attack what they called Big Liz, and for some reason this is not capitalized even though Big Liz was Big Girl. And then in a parenthetical it says, "They're not good names, are they?" But there is no question mark. There's a period, but not a question mark. So it sounds like I'm asking the question to the reader, but Munemoto just completely stops paying attention to Godzilla, who just runs away. And then Munemoto destroys the military, who have come to intervene in the battle. And then she just reverts to normal size. No blunt force atomic breath trauma required. So yeah, that was pretty garbage, was it not? I feel like I was requested to do this story by the family member in question. But for the life of me, I do not remember whether it was received positively or negatively. This is some AI image generator art of Munemoto. This one was made with the Perchance AI Image Generator. Godzilla versus giant humanoids is not really my favorite kind of idea for a Godzilla opponent. Obviously, both of these opponents are going to be in that vein, but when I did the AI image generation for this image, I tried to emphasize the Jet Jaguar comparison because Munemoto is not described in any sort of physical detail, whereas the next monster is. And yes, I know, it would be hard to see Godzilla fighting a monster that looks like this. And you all thought that my original kaiju creations couldn't get any weirder or worse. That being said, I do think this next one is actually kind of decent. So for this one, I can't show the first set of images because they include this family member in them explicitly. But like I said, I tried to use the text in this document to create an AI image that semi-decently reflects the monster that this family member becomes. And just before I start reading, no, as described in this this document, this monster, who I will be referring to from now on as Getobakkan, does not have a belly. I just couldn't find a way to retain most of this image, which I generated through the Bing image generator, that didn't have the mouth stomach. There's actually a decent amount of backstory to this version, and I'll probably talk about that after I'm done reading it. So basically, Getobakkan and his brother are on the shoreline of the east coast of the US, and Getobakkan goes over to a small island offshore, and a bunch of top secret military staff are swarming the island inexplicably. It's interesting because Getobakkan goes up to one of the security guards, and the security guard says, "This area is top secret," and Getobakkan responds, "So, my friend owns this island," as if that would matter at all. I think this is one of the first instances of actual dialogue in a piece of writing that I had, though, so it's worth noting for that if nothing else. It's implied that Getobakkan was called forth to the island, even though it was implied heavily by the phrasing that he just decided to go over there. So I thought it was just like a surprise, like, oh, there was gonna be some sort of twist to this, but now I'm thinking that this was like a premeditated thing. And then, of course, the security officer just tells Getobakkan to shut up and leave now. And then, pretty much inexplicably, a nuclear blast explodes on the island, destroying nearly everything close by. In fairness, I know the real-world location that this is referring to. There pretty much was nothing to wipe off the face of the earth. That part of the world basically is the edge of the world. But it is kind of funny because a nuclear blast would cause a shockwave in a massive radius around that specific location, and a lot of people would have died if a nuke went off there. It's interesting because it says everyone was dead except Getobakkan, who is shocked by the devastation, but his brother comes out completely fine, so I must have not known how much radius a nuclear blast had when I was this young. Yeah, the brother asks him, "How did you survive?" And Getobakkan is just like, "I don't know." Yeah, he just goes home, but it is noted that he has a, quote, splitting headache, and he gets a fever and keeps that fever for a few weeks, and then he leaves to go visit some relatives. He goes and visits his relatives, who question him and how he's feeling because he doesn't seem well, and then he just inexplicably falls to the ground and begins to grow in size. It is never explained, but his clothes remain on his body even though he grows, like, presumably to 100 meters. I think it actually says something about that in a second. Yeah, he rips through the roof as he grows, and spikes jut from his back. His fingernails sharpen into claws, and he grows reptilian skin. And then there's a roar written in onomatopoeia that I have no earthly idea how to pronounce. He grows to 110 meters in height and weighs 100,000 tons. If I'm not mistaken, I believe... Well, you know what? Let me look it up behind the scenes here. No, okay, so the Heisei Godzilla is 50,000 metric tons in Godzilla 1984/Return of Godzilla, and Heisei Godzilla weighs 60,000 metric tons from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah forward, and the Heisei Mechagodzilla weighs 150,000 metric tons, so Getobakkan falls somewhere in the middle of those two. No one was hurt in the collapse of the house. I'm envisioning a way that that would have happened because that house had a basement. I love how the military just inexplicably show up in these two stories, including stealth bombers for some reason. So Getobakkan punches through some fighter jets, causing them to crash into the neighbor's house. There were actually two houses next to that one, so, well, at least here in the text it says, "Whoops, my bad," and that's enough to make the planes and the military retreat. Oh, it's not a full retreat, it's just an aerial retreat. Actually, no, it's not even that, because the tanks and the helicopters come by, but the fighter jets and the stealth bombers for some reason decide to dip. Okay, now this is an interesting thing, and I noted it earlier when I kind of passed over it before I recorded this video. General Hicks, the man who had killed Villa, was leading an assault on Getobakkan. Why, of all characters, did I bring back Hicks for this? I guess he was an American, and I'm an American, so I guess maybe that's the only one that makes sense. It's just weird. None of the other stories that I have read so far have had previously existing Godzilla human characters come back for one of these stories. So basically, Getobakkan takes out a large number of the military craft, but one of the helicopters hits Getobakkan with missiles of some sort, and somehow that's enough to cause Getobakkan to topple to the ground. Even though in most cases, human militaries are not capable of doing any sort of damage or in any way halting the progress of giant monsters. Okay, so Getobakkan hears Godzilla's roar over the horizon, and Getobakkan roars back, and the military retreats in full at this point because it is clear that Godzilla is about to fight the, quote, new kid on the block. Before I continue to the last page, I just want to bring up, typically Godzilla's roar is written out in onomatopoeia as Griong. I never wrote it that way as a kid, and I've obviously been omitting it from a number of these writings that I've gone over at this point. The onomatopoeia that I used personally for years, the way I sounded it out, take the word Ariel, A-E-R-I-A-L, and replace the L with an R. I just always pronounced it as and I guess that was how I thought it would need to be spelled. I think that's the first time I've actually said that since I was like 10 years old. As is typical of the Godzilla Brawler canon though, the first thing Godzilla does is just blast the atomic breath at Getobakkan. You can really tell I was a Heisei baby because beam spam was just so rooted in my psyche that even when I wrote my own Godzilla fight stories, they always started with a beam battle. Getobakkan shoots a freeze ray from his mouth. It says Godzilla's breath had frozen into frost, but I thought, based on reading this, that Getobakkan froze his atomic breath into a big solid chunk, but it's frost. We're just gonna go with what the writing says. The next part is interesting because it really shows how strong Getobakkan was. Getobakkan, quote, grabs Godzilla and punt kicks him into the sky. The closest thing I can think of is Godzilla 1990s / Godzilla 1954's throw from Godzilla Unleashed on the Wii. Getobakkan jumps up, I guess, for a follow-up attack, much like in that move. But despite the fact that Godzilla is airborne after having been, quote, punt kicked into the air, Godzilla slams his tail into the airborne animal. Getobakkan crashes back into the earth, and then Godzilla charges in and follows up with some jabs. But they are dodged, and Getobakkan bites Godzilla in the neck, causing blood to gush from the wound. Godzilla, of course, roars in pain in response to this. I'm detecting some inspiration from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974 in this moment. Okay, this is weirdly specific. Godzilla shoves Getobakkan away and then kicks him, quote, in the knee, causing Getobakkan to fall down. And then Godzilla grabs Getobakkan by the neck and then slams him into the ground repeatedly. You know, the weird thing is I know that I really love the family member that this is based off of, so I don't know why Godzilla is so aggressive. I mean, at least I was making it somewhat realistic for a physical confrontation and Mortal Kombat with Godzilla. Okay, Getobakkan breaks free, following it up with a tackle and then freezing Godzilla presumably to the ground with an energy blast. Getobakkan follows up with a series of stomps, but Godzilla breaks free anyway and then tail slams Getobakkan. And now Godzilla is going for the jugular with a bite. I guess as retribution for that previous one. Oh, no, I forgot. So if you remember at the end of Godzilla Final Wars, Kaiser Ghidorah like bites Godzilla and then starts to drain away his life force energy. Godzilla basically does the same thing to Getobakkan here, but it does not kill Getobakkan. It reverts him back into his human form, essentially doing the same thing that Munemoto did at the end of her story, but giving it a little bit more of a logical explanation, because at least Godzilla was being sapped of his energy at the end of Final Wars, so you can kind of see Godzilla doing it to Getobakkan here. So yeah, Getobakkan reverts to human form, and then Godzilla roars in triumph and then heads away. That's literally the last thing said about Godzilla in this story. So all of the relatives, I guess, gather around Getobakkan after he reverts to his human form. It says that they are, quote, all shocked, but they forget it and help him. Getobakkan asks, what happened? And one of the relatives says, honestly, I don't know. And the literal last sentence here before the end is, quote, and with that ends another adventure of Godzilla. So yeah, hope everyone stuck around for all that. Just for some context for all of you, because you didn't get to read any of that. Those stories were written pretty poorly due to their age. Godzilla vs. Munemoto was the older of the two stories, and the last modified date shown here on my computer is August 13th, 2010. As I've said in the past, I have a feeling it's older than that, but I don't know. But if we go based off of that date, I would have been 13 when I wrote that. The other one was written about 11 months later, at least according to the modified date. Godzilla vs. Getobakkan was last modified on July 15th, 2011. So I would have been 14 when I wrote that one, according to the computer. Like I said, I think I did these on request, at least the first one, Godzilla vs. Munemoto. Getobakkan, I was really close with that particular family member, so I probably just wanted to write a similar story for them to kind of show off my progress as a writer. You probably couldn't have told based on the blurred text, but there was substantially more written in the Getobakkan story. Not a lot, and it wasn't of particularly high quality, but I could definitely tell I had improved as a writer between those two documents. Obviously, they were both giant humanoids with vaguely monstrous elements. Honestly, if you go with the pictures that I had of the family members in question, these were definitely not serious bouts. Neither of these monsters would have stood a remote chance against, like, the Heisei Godzilla. But I mostly wanted to go over these because it kind of opens up the discussion to, you know, what were my old writings focused on? And it's kind of adorable that the young version of me loved Godzilla so much, and I loved my family members so much, and I loved writing so much that I went out of my way to write stories where they would end up being opponents for the thing that I, like, loved the most. So neither of them are probably ever going to watch this video, but just know that I love you. And my love for you is enshrined alongside my love for Godzilla. So, Munemoto and Getobakkan for Godzilla Save the Earth May. Anyways, that about covers it. Hopefully that doesn't take a million years to edit like some of the last few videos have. Drop a like, leave a comment, tell me some of the weird things you wrote for Godzilla to fight in the past, if you have indeed done so. Or you could just talk about, you know, the relationship between Godzilla and your extended family. I'm sure there are quite a few tales to tell. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Catch you on the flip side.